The call came at 2:47 p.m. while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my home office. Charlene's voice dripped with that artificial sweetness she reserves for special occasions and major lies. "Honey, the kids have planned the most amazing surprise for your birthday tonight," she said, practically giggling through the phone. "They booked that fancy steakhouse downtown. You know, the one with the 2-hour wait list, and they're so excited to celebrate their amazing dad turning 50. I let her ramble about the 7 p.m. sharp reservation while I pulled up the security camera feeds on my second monitor. There's Nelson, my 17-year-old, hauling boxes from our attic to the U-Haul truck parked in our driveway. There's Lila, my 15-year-old, carefully loading what looks suspiciously like her entire bedroom into garbage bags. And there's Kylie, my 12-year-old, sitting in the passenger seat of Charlene's BMW, clutching a manila folder thick with documents. The beautiful irony? I've been waiting for this exact moment for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. See, most guys would be devastated discovering their family's elaborate abandonment plan on their birthday. Most guys would feel crushed watching their wife orchestrate their children's disappearance while pretending to plan a celebration. But I'm not most guys. I'm the guy who's been documenting every suspicious bank withdrawal, every hushed phone conversation, every weekend trip to visit Charlene's sister in Seattle that never included actual photos with said sister. I'm also the guy who installed those security cameras 18 months ago under the guise of home protection after that string of neighborhood break-ins. Charlene thought it was paranoid. The kids rolled their eyes. Meanwhile, I've been building a comprehensive record of their planning sessions, their late-night packing parties, and their practice runs loading the truck. The backstory matters here, and I'll give you the condensed version because the details make this whole thing even more satisfying. 3 years ago, Charlene inherited her father's construction business when he passed suddenly. The business that I had been running day to day for the previous 5 years while her father collected the profits and took the credit. The business where I redesigned the entire operational structure, landed our 3 biggest contracts, and personally saved from bankruptcy twice. When the will was read, everything went to Charlene as the only child. The business, the property, the equipment, all of it. Her father had promised me partnership papers that never materialized. Charlene swore she would honor his verbal commitments and make me a full partner immediately. That lasted exactly 6 weeks until she informed me I could continue as operations manager at my current salary or find new employment. The kids sided with her completely. Nelson told me I was being unreasonable expecting ownership of something that wasn't mine. Lila said I should be grateful to even have a job there. Kylie, who was 9 at the time, parroted whatever her siblings said about daddy being greedy and trying to steal from mommy. But here's what they didn't know about their greedy daddy. I had been planning my exit strategy since the day Charlene's father first promised me partnership. I had been building relationships with every major contractor in our area, learning their business models, understanding their supply chains, and most importantly, identifying their weaknesses. I had been slowly, methodically, positioning myself to compete with them. I spent 2 years becoming indispensable to our biggest supplier and 3 largest clients, not as Charlene's employee, but as their trusted operational brain. When they thought about construction services, they thought about me, not the company name on the contract. The day Charlene decided to keep me as her employee instead of her partner, I smiled, accepted her terms, and immediately began implementing the second phase of my plan. Every client relationship I had built, every supplier connection I had cultivated, every operational improvement I had designed for their business was about to become the foundation of their destruction. While they spent 3 years planning their escape to Seattle, I spent 3 years building the infrastructure to obliterate the business they were stealing from me. I established my own LLC 18 months ago, obtained the necessary licenses and bonds, and secured a line of credit using my personal credit history that Charlene knew nothing about. The paperwork is filed for equipment purchases, insurance policies are written, and employee contracts are drafted for the 3 best workers currently employed by Charlene's company, all of whom have already committed to jumping ship the moment I give them the signal. The phone is buzzing with text messages from the kids. "Dad, don't be late tonight. We can't wait to see your face when you see what we planned. Dad, this is going to be the best birthday surprise ever. Dad, we love you so much and tonight is all about celebrating you." I'm responding with appropriate enthusiasm while watching them load the last of their belongings. "Oh wow, kids. I can't wait to see what you have planned. This is so thoughtful of you. I love you all too, and I'm so proud of how organized you've been with this surprise." What they don't realize is that while they've been planning their surprise, I've been planning mine. The restaurant reservation they think will keep me occupied for 3 hours? I already called and confirmed their party never actually booked anything. The flight to Seattle they think I'll discover too late? I've known about those tickets since the day they purchased them 6 weeks ago. But the real surprise, the one they haven't seen coming, is that tomorrow morning I'll be filing the paperwork to dissolve our business partnership under the clause Charlene's father buried in the operating agreement that she never bothered to read completely. The clause that gives me majority operational control if I can demonstrate the primary owner is engaging in activities detrimental to business continuity. Activities like withdrawing $200,000 in working capital to fund a cross-country relocation without board approval. Activities like relocating key operational assets without proper documentation. Activities like abandoning contractual obligations to pursue personal ventures. I've spent 3 years building detailed documentation of every misstep, every questionable decision, every moment where Charlene prioritized her personal interests over business obligations. I've been recording meetings using a digital recorder app on my phone that looks like a note-taking application. I've been saving communications by forwarding important emails to a personal account she doesn't know exists. I've been photographing documents, copying files, and building relationships with every person whose approval I'll need to execute my plan. The most beautiful part is the paper trail she created herself. Every withdrawal over $10,000 required her signature on forms that specifically outlined the business purpose for the funds. Every time she wrote business purpose as equipment purchase or operational expenses while actually funding her escape plan, she was creating evidence of misconduct that will hold up in any legal proceeding. I have copies of 18 different withdrawal authorizations where the stated purpose doesn't match the actual use of funds. I also have security footage of her removing equipment from our warehouse that was never reported as sold or transferred. That angle grinder set she supposedly donated to charity? It's sitting in a storage unit she rented under her maiden name. Those compressors she claimed were broken beyond repair? They're loaded in the back of her brother's pickup truck according to my cameras from 2 weeks ago. She's been systematically stealing inventory to either sell or relocate, and I have visual evidence of every incident. The security cameras show them making final preparations. Charlene is reviewing what appears to be a timeline on her phone. Nelson is securing the U-Haul door. The girls are doing one last sweep of their rooms. They're probably planning to call me around 8 p.m. with some emergency excuse about why they can't make it to the restaurant. Car trouble, maybe. Or one of the kids suddenly falling ill. By then, they'll be at the airport boarding their flight with my money, believing they've successfully escaped their boring life with their boring husband and father, who they can finally leave behind. Except they have no idea that the moment their plane takes off, I'll be making calls to every major client we've ever worked with. Calls to inform them that due to Charlene's unexpected abandonment of her responsibilities, all current contracts are being transferred to my new company, which just happens to offer the same services at competitive rates with much more reliable management. They think they're escaping to start fresh in Seattle. What they're actually doing is handing me everything I've worked for on a silver platter while simultaneously destroying their own financial future. My phone is ringing again. Probably Charlene checking to make sure I'm still planning to arrive at the restaurant on time. I can see her through the camera standing by the U-Haul, phone pressed to her ear, probably reading from the script she's prepared for this conversation. I'm going to answer with the same enthusiastic tone I've been using all day, confirm that I'll absolutely be there at 7 p.m. sharp, and thank her again for organizing such a thoughtful surprise. What she doesn't know is that I've already made 3 calls today. The first was to our accountant, informing him that I'll need an emergency audit of all business accounts starting tomorrow morning due to suspected misuse of funds. The second was to our business attorney, requesting an immediate review of the partnership dissolution clause in our operating agreement. The third was to the building owner who rents us our warehouse space, giving him a heads up that ownership of the business may be changing hands and ensuring that my LLC is positioned to take over the lease. Each of these calls was carefully timed for maximum impact. The accountant call ensures that all business accounts will be frozen pending investigation before Charlene can access any additional funds from Seattle. The attorney call starts the legal process that will ultimately transfer business ownership to me. The landlord call protects the physical assets and ensures I maintain control of our primary operational base. Because the truth is, this is the most thoughtful surprise they could have given me. They've just handed me the perfect opportunity to implement 3 years of careful planning without me having to manufacture a reason or wait for the right moment. Their escape plan has become the trigger for my takeover plan. Tonight, while they're celebrating their escape at 30,000 feet, I'll be celebrating the beginning of their complete financial ruin from the comfort of my home office, surrounded by 3 years' worth of documentation that's about to become the foundation of the most satisfying revenge I've ever executed. I'll be making calls to clients, suppliers, and employees, informing them that Charlene has abandoned her responsibilities and that all business operations are transferring to my company, effective immediately. The only question now is whether I should wait until their plane lands in Seattle to begin making calls, or if I should start the moment I confirm their departure. I'm leaning towards starting immediately. Why give them even a few hours of peace when they've spent 3 years planning to destroy mine? But there's also something to be said for letting them land, letting them get settled, letting them start to believe they've actually pulled this off before I pull the rug out from under them completely. Let them spend one night thinking they've won before they wake up to discover they've lost everything. The cameras show Nelson closing the U-Haul door and giving Charlene a thumbs up. Lila is buckling Kylie into the BMW. They're probably planning to drive the U-Haul to some predetermined location, maybe a storage facility near the airport, where they'll abandon it and take the BMW to catch their flight. They think they've planned for every contingency except the one contingency they never saw coming. Time to answer this call and play my part in their little surprise party. Little do they know, their surprise is about to become my victory, and their new life in Seattle is about to become a financial nightmare they never anticipated. Update coming soon. Update 1. Holy hell, you guys! The responses to my first post have been incredible. Some of you called this fake, some of you said I should just let them go. But most of you wanted to know how this played out. Well, buckle up because I'm typing this from my home office at 11:47 p.m. and they have no idea what's coming for them. So I answered Charlene's call with the most enthusiastic voice I could manage. Oh, honey, I can't wait to see what you and the kids have planned tonight. This is so thoughtful, and I'm just blown away by how much effort everyone put into this surprise. The kids have been texting me all day about it, and I can tell they're really excited. I even threw in some questions about the restaurant to really sell it. Do I need to dress up? Should I bring anything? Will there be parking downtown? She had answers for everything. The restaurant has valet parking. Business casual is fine. Just bring your appetite for celebration. She was so smooth with her responses that I almost admired the planning that went into this deception. Almost. But then I remembered that every word coming out of her mouth was designed to keep me distracted while she stole everything I had built and disappeared with my children. The cameras showed me everything I needed to see. By 4:30 p.m., the U-Haul was loaded and sealed. Charlene was doing final walkthroughs of the house, probably making sure they hadn't left any evidence of their real plan. Nelson was loading their suitcases into her BMW. The girls were sitting in the back seat with their tablets and snacks, probably excited about their big adventure to start fresh in Seattle. At 5:15 p.m., they drove away. I watched the whole convoy leave through my security system, Charlene in her BMW leading the way, followed by Nelson driving the U-Haul truck with what I now realize was probably everything valuable they could steal from our house and business. They thought they were so clever with their timing. Give Dad 2 hours to get ready and drive downtown, which would put me at the restaurant right around the time their plane was taking off. But here's what they didn't account for. I didn't wait until their plane took off to start making calls. The moment I confirmed they were gone, I started executing 3 years of carefully planned destruction. First call was to Marcus, our biggest client. Marcus runs a commercial development company, and we've been handling his projects for 4 years. But more importantly, Marcus has been dealing with me personally on every single project, not Charlene. I told him there had been some concerning developments with Charlene's management of company resources, and that I was starting my own firm to ensure continuity of service for his projects. Did he want to transfer his contracts to my new company to avoid any potential disruption? Marcus didn't even hesitate. He said he'd been working with me all along anyway, and he trusted my judgment completely. He asked if I could have transfer paperwork ready by Thursday. I told him it would be ready tomorrow. Then he said something that really drove home how well I had positioned myself over the years. He said he had always assumed I was the actual owner of the company and that Charlene was just the administrative side of things. That conversation lasted 22 minutes because Marcus wanted to discuss every active project and timeline concern. By the end of the call, we had mapped out a complete transition plan that would be seamless for his business operations. Second call was to Jennifer at our supply company. Same conversation, same result. She said she'd been wondering when I was going to start my own business because everyone in the industry knew I was the operational brain behind everything. She offered to extend the same credit terms to my new company and said she'd start processing orders through my business immediately. Third call was to David, another major client. Fourth call was to Sandra at the equipment rental company. Fifth call was to Tommy, our most reliable subcontractor. Every single conversation went the same way. Not one person expressed surprise that I was leaving Charlene's company. Not one person seemed concerned about transferring their business relationship to my firm. By 7:30 p.m., I had secured commitments from every major client, supplier, and subcontractor we worked with. Charlene's company had just lost about 90% of its business relationships in the span of 2 hours. And the beautiful part is that every conversation was completely legitimate. These people wanted to work with me, not her company. But the real genius was the timing. At exactly 7:45 p.m., their plane was supposed to take off, which meant they would be unreachable for the next few hours while their business relationships evaporated and their financial foundation crumbled. Except they started calling me at 8:23 p.m. First, it was Kylie's number calling mine. I let it go to voicemail. The message was Charlene's voice, not Kylie's. She sounded confused and slightly panicked. "Hey, honey, we're having some car trouble and we might be a little late to the restaurant. Nothing serious, but the U-Haul is having engine problems and we're pulled over getting it checked. Don't worry about us. Just enjoy your dinner and we'll figure this out. Call me back when you get this." Car trouble. Right. I knew exactly what was happening. They had driven the U-Haul to some storage facility or drop-off point, but when they tried to abandon it and head to the airport, something had gone wrong with their plan. Maybe the storage place was closed. Maybe they couldn't get the U-Haul returned. Maybe they had tried to access some of the business accounts I had already frozen and discovered that their funding for this escape plan was no longer available. I didn't call back. Instead, I made 3 more business calls. While Charlene was leaving increasingly panicked voicemails, I was systematically dismantling the business foundation she thought she owned. The calls kept coming. 8:41 p.m., 8:52 p.m., 9:07 p.m. Different numbers each time. Nelson's phone, Lila's phone, even a number I didn't recognize. The voicemails got progressively more frantic, and the stories kept changing. The car trouble story evolved into a family emergency story. Charlene's sister in Seattle had suddenly fallen ill, and they needed to fly out immediately to help her. But what really told me they were scrambling was the inconsistency in their stories. In one message, Charlene said they were at a mechanic's shop getting the U-Haul fixed. In the next message, Nelson said they were at the hospital with the sick sister. In the third message, Lila was crying in the background about how they missed their flight and everything was going wrong. By 9:30 p.m., they had figured out I wasn't buying their stories and wasn't going to answer my phone. That's when Charlene started calling from her own number and leaving messages that revealed how desperate they were getting. The first message was still trying to maintain the illusion. "Honey, I don't understand why you're not answering your phone. We really did have an emergency come up and we feel terrible about missing your birthday dinner. Please call us back so we can explain what happened and maybe reschedule for this weekend." The second message, 20 minutes later, had a different tone entirely. "I need you to call me back right now. There's something important we need to discuss and I can't reach you. This is serious and I need to know you're okay. Please just pick up your phone." The third message, at 10:15 p.m., was when she finally started to crack. "I know you're getting these messages and I know you're choosing not to answer. I don't know what you think you know, but we need to talk about this like adults. There are things you don't understand about our situation, and I need to explain them to you. Call me back tonight." But the fourth message, the one that came in while I was typing this update, was the one that told me she had finally figured out what was happening. Her voice was shaking with rage and panic in equal measure. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you can just destroy everything we built together because you're having some kind of midlife crisis tantrum? Well, let me tell you something about the business you think you're stealing. There are contracts and legal obligations that you can't just walk away from. There are employees who depend on these jobs. There are clients who have paid deposits for work that hasn't been completed. You can't just blow up people's lives because your feelings got hurt." She went on for almost 3 minutes about how I was being selfish and irresponsible, how I was putting innocent people's livelihoods at risk, how I needed to think about the consequences of my actions on our employees and clients. What she didn't mention was the $200,000 she had withdrawn from business accounts to fund their escape. She didn't mention the equipment she had been systematically removing from our warehouse. She didn't mention the lies, the deception, the 3 years of planning to abandon everything and everyone while pretending to care about my birthday celebration. But the most telling part of her message was the panic in her voice when she realized that her business inheritance was disappearing. 3 years ago, she was willing to cut me out of the partnership and keep me as an employee. Tonight, she sounded like someone who was beginning to understand that without me, the business she inherited was worthless. I'm not calling her back tonight. Let her sit with that panic for a few more hours. Let her and the kids figure out their next move while sitting in some airport hotel, realizing that their carefully planned escape has turned into a financial disaster. Because tomorrow morning, when business hours start, I'll be calling our remaining employees to offer them positions with my company. I'll be calling our bank to report suspected misuse of business funds. I'll be calling our insurance company to transfer policies to my new business. and I'll be calling our attorney to begin the formal process of dissolving our partnership agreement due to abandonment and misconduct. I'll also be calling the storage facility where she's been hiding stolen equipment to inform them that items in her unit were taken without authorization from my business. Every step they took to plan this escape created evidence that I can now use to demonstrate their systematic theft and deception. The thing that's really getting to me is how they're trying to make this my fault, like I'm the one who's being unreasonable and destructive. Charlene's message tonight was full of concern for our employees and clients. But where was that concern when she was planning to leave them all without notice? Where was that professional responsibility when she was using business funds to finance her personal relocation? They wanted to surprise me for my birthday. Mission accomplished. I'm surprised by how quickly their plan fell apart once they realized I wasn't the clueless victim they thought I was. I'm surprised by how panicked Charlene sounds when she realizes the business she thought she owned is evaporating around her. The real confrontation is coming tomorrow when business hours start, and they realize the full extent of what they've lost. Tonight was just the opening move. And you know what the most satisfying part of all this is? 3 years ago, when Charlene decided to cut me out of the partnership and keep me as an employee, she told me I should be grateful for the opportunity to continue working for the business I had built. She said I was being unreasonable to expect ownership of something that wasn't legally mine. Tonight, sitting in my home office surrounded by signed transfer agreements from every client and supplier we've ever worked with, I finally have the answer to her question about what belonged to whom. The business relationships belong to me. The operational expertise belongs to me. What belonged to her was a piece of paper that said she inherited a company, but a company without clients, without suppliers, without employees, and without operational capability isn't really a company at all. She's about to learn the difference between owning something on paper and actually controlling something in reality. And that difference is going to cost her everything she thought she had stolen from me. I can hear my phone buzzing with another call as I finish typing this. Probably Charlene with a new story about why they missed their flight. But there's no going back from this. They made their choice 3 years ago when they decided I wasn't worthy of partnership. Tonight, they made their choice again when they decided to steal from me and abandon me on my birthday. Tomorrow, they're going to discover the consequences of those choices. Update 2. You guys, I cannot believe what just happened. If you thought last night was intense, today has been absolutely insane. I'm shaking as I type this, not from fear, but from pure adrenaline. Because this woman really thought she could outmaneuver me after 3 years of me planning for exactly this moment. So I woke up at 6 a.m. sharp and started making the calls I promised. First was our 3 employees. I called Gideon, our site supervisor, and offered him a 20% raise to jump ship to my company immediately. He didn't even hesitate. He said he had been waiting for this call, and that he'd rather work for someone who actually understood construction than someone who treated the business like a bank account. Then I called our 2 other guys, same offer, same result. By 6:30 a.m., Charlene's company had 0 employees except for her. Next call was to our bank. I explained to the business account manager that I needed to report suspected misuse of company funds and requested an immediate audit of all transactions over the past 6 months. The manager said they would freeze all business accounts pending investigation and that I should come in today with my documentation. Then I called our attorney. He was very interested to hear about the partnership dissolution clause and said he could have preliminary paperwork ready by noon if I brought in my evidence of business abandonment and misconduct. By 8 a.m., I had systematically dismantled every support system Charlene thought she had. The business had no employees, no access to funds, no legal protection, and no operational capability. It felt exactly as satisfying as I had imagined it would for the past 3 years. That's when my doorbell rang. I looked at the security cameras, and there they were. All 4 of them standing on my front porch with their suitcases looking exhausted and defeated. Charlene was holding some kind of folder, and Nelson looked like he had been crying. The girls were just staring at the ground. I opened the door, and the first words out of Charlene's mouth were not an apology or an explanation. She said we need to talk about this situation like adults and figure out how to move forward together as a family. I told her there was nothing to figure out. She had made her choice when she decided to steal from me and abandon me on my birthday. She had made her choice when she decided I wasn't worthy of partnership in the business I built. Now she was dealing with the consequences of those choices. But Charlene wasn't giving up that easily. She came into my house uninvited and spread papers all over my dining room table. She said I was being emotional and irrational and that we needed to look at this from a business perspective. She said the partnership agreement clearly stated that she was the majority owner and that what I was doing constituted theft of company assets. So I spread my papers on the table right next to hers. 18 withdrawal authorizations where she had lied about the business purpose of the funds. Security footage timestamps showing her removing equipment from our warehouse. Copies of the storage unit rental agreement in her maiden name. Photos of the stolen equipment in her storage unit that I had taken yesterday afternoon while they were at the airport. Charlene looked at my evidence for maybe 30 seconds before she tried a different approach. She said I was being vindictive and petty, and that I was hurting our children just to get back at her. She said the kids had nothing to do with our business disagreement, and that I was punishing them for her decisions. I told her that she was the one who involved the children in her theft and deception. She was the one who had them pack belongings that didn't belong to them. She was the one who was planning to move them across the country using stolen money without telling their father. She was the one who was teaching them that lying and stealing were acceptable as long as you could get away with it. Nelson tried to jump in at this point. He said they had never meant to hurt me, and that they were just trying to start fresh somewhere new. He said Charlene had explained to them that the business belonged to her family, and that they had every right to take what was theirs. So I asked Nelson exactly what he thought belonged to his family. I asked him to name one client who had ever asked to speak to Charlene instead of me. I asked him to name one supplier who had her personal contact information. I asked him to name one project that she had managed from start to finish without my involvement. Nelson couldn't answer any of those questions. Neither could Charlene. Because the truth is that she had been a silent partner at best and an active hindrance at worst for the entire time she had owned the business. But here's where Charlene really showed her true colors. Instead of acknowledging what I had just proven, she tried to flip the script entirely. She said that my behavior over the past 24 hours had shown her who I really was underneath all the pretending. She said I was controlling and manipulative, and that she was starting to understand why her father had never actually made me a partner. She said her father had seen something in my character that made him hesitant to give me legal ownership of his business. She said maybe he knew that I would try to destroy everything the moment I didn't get my way. She said maybe he was protecting his legacy from someone who would use it as a weapon against his family. I have to admit that one got to me. For about 10 seconds, I actually wondered if she was right. But then I remembered something her father had said to me privately about 6 months before he died. He had told me that he was worried about Charlene's spending habits and her lack of interest in the actual business operations. He had said he was considering changing his will to leave the business to me directly because he trusted me to take care of it properly. He never got the chance to make that change because he died suddenly. But hearing Charlene try to use his memory as a weapon against me made me realize just how far she was willing to go to avoid taking responsibility for her own actions. So I told her exactly what her father had said about her. I told her about his concerns regarding her financial irresponsibility. I told her about his plan to leave the business to me. I told her that the only reason she inherited anything was because he died before he could correct his mistake. Charlene went completely silent for about 30 seconds. Then she said I was lying and that her father would never have said those things about her. She said I was making up stories to justify my theft of her inheritance. That's when I pulled out my phone and played her the voice recording I had made of that conversation with her father. I had recorded it originally because I wanted to have proof of his intentions in case something exactly like this ever happened. I never imagined I would need to use it to defend myself against his own daughter. The recording was crystal clear. Her father's voice talking about how worried he was about leaving the business to Charlene. His voice saying that he thought I would be a better steward of his life's work. His voice saying that he was planning to change his will but wanted to wait until after the holidays because he didn't want to upset Charlene during family gatherings. When the recording ended, Charlene just stared at me for what felt like forever. Then she said that even if that recording was real, it didn't change the legal reality of the situation. She said her father had left the business to her, and that what I was doing was still theft regardless of what he might have intended to do. But then she made a critical mistake. She said that if I returned all the clients and suppliers to her company and called off the audit, she would be willing to discuss giving me a minority partnership in the business. She said we could start over and try to work together as partners instead of enemies. That offer told me everything I needed to know about how desperate she was getting. 3 years ago, she had told me I should be grateful to work as her employee. Yesterday, she had been planning to abandon me entirely. Now she was offering me minority partnership as if that was some kind of generous compromise. I told her that she still didn't understand the situation she was in. I told her that the business she thought she owned no longer existed. I told her that the clients, suppliers, and employees had all chosen to work with me instead of her. I told her that her inheritance was worth exactly as much as a business with no customers, no workers, and no operational capability. Charlene said I was being unreasonable, and that we could rebuild the business together if I would just stop trying to destroy everything out of spite. She said that my behavior was proving that I never really cared about the business itself, only about getting revenge against her. So I asked her where she had been planning to rebuild the business from. I asked her if she had been planning to do it from Seattle using the $200,000 she had stolen from the company accounts. I asked her if she had been planning to use the equipment she had hidden in her storage unit to start fresh in Washington while leaving me with nothing. That's when she finally admitted what this had really been about all along. She said that she had never wanted to be stuck running her father's business for the rest of her life. She said that she had wanted to sell it and use the money to do something completely different with her life. She said that the problem was that the business was worthless without me, so she had been trying to figure out how to extract its value while leaving me behind. She said the Seattle plan had been her way of forcing me to buy her out at full value or else lose everything I had worked for. She said she had expected me to panic and offer to purchase her share of the business rather than watch it all disappear. So her whole elaborate escape plan hadn't been about starting fresh in Seattle. It had been about manipulating me into paying her for the privilege of keeping what I had already built. She had been planning to extort me for the value of my own work. But the thing that really got to me was when she said that she had never understood why I cared so much about the business anyway. She said it was just construction work, and that there were plenty of other construction companies I could work for if this one didn't work out. That's when I realized that she had never understood what the business meant to me. She had never understood that it wasn't just a job or a source of income. It was everything I had built with my own hands and my own knowledge and my own relationships. It was the proof that I could create something valuable and lasting. She saw the business as an asset to be liquidated. I saw it as my life's work to be protected. I told her that our conversation was over and that she needed to leave my house immediately. I told her that if she wanted to continue this discussion, she could contact my attorney, and we could handle everything through proper legal channels. Charlene said that if I didn't start cooperating with her, she was going to make this much more difficult for everyone involved. She said she had legal rights as the owner of the business and that she was going to enforce those rights whether I liked it or not. She said she knew attorneys too, and that she wasn't going to let me steal her inheritance without a fight. I told her that she was welcome to try. I told her that I had been preparing for this confrontation for 3 years, and that I was ready for whatever legal battle she wanted to start. I told her that every move she made from this point forward would just give me more evidence of her bad faith and vindictive behavior. That's when she finally left, but not before telling me that this wasn't over and that I would regret forcing her to fight me through the courts. The kids didn't say much during the whole confrontation, but I could see that they were starting to understand that their mother hadn't been entirely honest with them about what was happening. Nelson especially looked like he was beginning to realize that the family business dispute was a lot more complicated than he had been told. So now, I'm sitting here waiting for my attorney appointment this afternoon and preparing for whatever Charlene is planning to throw at me next. But honestly, I'm not worried. I've got 3 years of documentation, recorded evidence of her father's real intentions, and proof of her systematic theft and deception. She wanted a war. Now she's got one. And I'm going to make sure she regrets every single decision that led us to this point. Part 4, coming soon. This is far from over yet. Final update. This is it, guys. The final chapter of the most satisfying revenge I've ever executed. If you've been following this saga, you know it's been building to this moment for 3 years. What happened over the past week has exceeded even my wildest expectations for how perfectly everything could fall into place. So after my confrontation with Charlene, I went to my attorney appointment. My lawyer looked over all my documentation for about an hour before he told me this was one of the most clear-cut cases of business abandonment and misconduct he had ever seen. He said that with the recording of her father's intentions, the evidence of systematic theft, and her admission that the whole thing was an extortion scheme, we had everything we needed to dissolve the partnership and transfer full ownership to me. But here's where it gets interesting. Charlene wasn't bluffing about having her own attorneys. She hired the most expensive business litigation firm in the city, and they immediately filed for an emergency injunction to stop me from operating my company using what they called stolen client relationships and business assets. I was actually impressed by how quickly she moved. Within 48 hours of our confrontation, I had legal papers demanding that I return all clients to her company, cease operations of my competing business, and pay damages for tortious interference with her business relationships. Her attorneys were smart. They argued that regardless of what her father might have intended, the legal reality was that she owned the business and that I had systematically destroyed it through corporate sabotage and theft of trade secrets. They painted me as a disgruntled employee who had violated my fiduciary duty to the company and used insider knowledge to steal clients for personal gain. But then my attorney reminded me of something I had almost forgotten about. The partnership dissolution clause that I had been planning to use wasn't just about business abandonment. It also included a section about using company resources for personal benefit without disclosure to the other partners. See, when Charlene's father wrote that operating agreement, He was worried about exactly the kind of situation that had just happened. He had specifically included language that would allow the dissolution of the partnership if one partner used business funds or assets for personal projects without the knowledge and consent of the other partners. Every single withdrawal authorization that Charlene had signed over the past 6 months constituted a violation of that clause. She had systematically used company money to fund her personal relocation plan without disclosing the true purpose to me as her business partner. According to the operating agreement, that gave me the right to assume full control of the business and dissolve the partnership immediately. My attorney filed a counter motion that essentially said Charlene had voided her own ownership rights through her systematic violations of the partnership agreement. We requested that the court recognize me as the sole remaining partner and grant me full ownership of all business assets, relationships, and intellectual property. The beautiful part was that we could prove every single violation with her own paperwork. She had signed 18 different withdrawal authorizations over 6 months, each one listing false business purposes for the funds. The total amount was over $200,000, which represented nearly 40% of the company's working capital. But Charlene wasn't giving up that easily. Her attorneys came back with a new strategy. They argued that even if she had violated the partnership agreement, the appropriate remedy was monetary damages, not complete forfeiture of her ownership rights. They said that dissolving her ownership was disproportionate punishment and that I was using a technicality to steal a multi-million-dollar business over a $200,000 dispute. This is where the recording of her father became crucial. My attorney played that recording in court during our preliminary hearing. The judge heard Charlene's father clearly stating his intention to leave the business to me and his concerns about her financial irresponsibility. The judge said that while the recording didn't change the legal validity of the will, it did provide important context for interpreting the partnership agreement. He said it was clear that her father had intended the dissolution clause as protection against exactly the kind of behavior Charlene had demonstrated. But the real turning point came when Nelson decided to testify. I hadn't expected this at all. During the discovery process, Charlene's attorneys had subpoenaed Nelson to testify about the family's relocation plans and their understanding of the business ownership structure. They thought he would support Charlene's version of events and testify that the family had believed they were entitled to use business funds for their personal move. Instead, Nelson told the court exactly what had really happened. He testified that Charlene had specifically told the children that they needed to keep the relocation plans secret from me because I would try to stop them from taking what belonged to their family. He testified that she had instructed them to pack belongings from the business warehouse because those things were part of their inheritance. Most importantly, Nelson testified that Charlene had explicitly told them that the whole plan was designed to force me to buy her out of the business at full value. He told the court that she had said I would have no choice but to pay her what the business was worth rather than lose everything I had worked for. Nelson's testimony completely demolished Charlene's legal position. Her own son had just confirmed that the whole thing had been a deliberate extortion scheme designed to manipulate me into overpaying for my own work. The judge ruled in my favor on every single point. He dissolved the partnership, transferred full ownership of the business to me, and denied all of Charlene's claims for damages or injunctive relief. He specifically noted that Charlene's systematic violations of the partnership agreement had been willful and designed to extract money from the business through deception. But here's the part that made the past 3 years of planning feel completely worth it. The judge also ruled that Charlene was responsible for paying my attorney fees and court costs because her claims had been frivolous and made in bad faith. She had to pay almost $60,000 in legal fees for a case that she lost completely. The courtroom scene when the verdict was read was something I'll never forget. Charlene just sat there staring at the table while her expensive attorneys packed up their briefcases in obvious frustration. Instead, she walked out of that courtroom with nothing except massive legal debts and the obligation to repay the $200,000 she had stolen from business accounts. The business that she thought she owned and was planning to use as leverage against me was now legally and completely mine. Every client relationship, every supplier agreement, every piece of equipment, every operational process that I had built over the past 8 years was officially mine. But the financial impact on Charlene was even more devastating than I had anticipated because she had withdrawn over $200,000 from business accounts for personal use. And because the court had ruled that those withdrawals were unauthorized, she was legally required to repay that money to the business. Since the business was now entirely mine, she owed that money directly to me. She also lost the house. Turns out she had taken out a second mortgage against the house to fund part of her Seattle plan, and without the business income she had been counting on, she couldn't make the payments. The house went into foreclosure within 3 months of our court battle. Her expensive attorneys had been paid with borrowed money that she had expected to repay with her business buyout. When that didn't happen, she was left with massive legal debts and no income source. But the most satisfying part wasn't the financial destruction. It was watching her finally understand what she had actually lost. About 6 months after the court ruling, Charlene called me. She said she wanted to discuss the possibility of working together again. She said that maybe we could find a way for her to be involved in the business, even if it was just in a consulting capacity. I told her that ship had sailed 3 years ago when she decided I wasn't worthy of partnership. I told her that the business she had inherited and thrown away was now mine, and that she would never be involved in any capacity. She said that she had made mistakes, but that she had learned from them, and that we could build something even better together. She said that her father would have wanted us to work together rather than destroy each other. I reminded her that her father had specifically wanted me to have the business because he didn't trust her to run it properly. I reminded her that she had spent 3 years planning to steal from me and abandon me on my birthday. I reminded her that she had described my life's work as just construction work that I could easily replace. The conversation went on for almost an hour, because she kept trying different approaches to convince me. She talked about forgiveness and moving forward. She talked about the good times we had shared before the business dispute. Then she tried one last manipulation. She said that the children missed having a relationship with me, and that my refusal to reconcile with her was hurting them. She said that I was punishing the kids for her mistakes. So I told her exactly what I thought about that argument. I told her that she was the one who had involved the children in her theft and deception. She was the one who had taught them that lying and stealing were acceptable, as long as you didn't get caught. She was the one who had tried to move them across the country using stolen money without telling their father. I told her that if the children wanted a relationship with me, they were welcome to reach out directly. But that relationship would have nothing to do with her and nothing to do with the business that she had forfeited through her own choices. That conversation was 8 months ago. Nelson has called me a few times and we've had some good talks. He's starting to understand what really happened and why I responded the way I did. Lila has texted me occasionally. The business is thriving beyond anything I could have imagined. All the clients who transferred to my company have been incredibly loyal because they finally feel like they're working with someone who actually understands and cares about their projects. I've been able to expand into new areas because I'm not constantly fighting against someone who sees the business as just a source of money. I hired 4 new employees in the past year. Gideon is now my operations manager and he's become one of my closest friends. We work together like the team I always wanted but could never have when Charlene was involved. And here's the thing that makes this whole story feel complete. Last month I bought the building where Charlene's father originally started the business. It had been sold years ago when he needed cash flow, but it came back on the market and I was able to purchase it. I'm moving the business back to its original location, the place where her father built something meaningful before she inherited it and tried to destroy it for personal gain. The place where it all began 40 years ago is now where it will continue for the next 40 years. Sometimes I think about whether I should feel guilty about how thoroughly I destroyed her financially. Then I remember that she spent 3 years planning to do exactly the same thing to me. She just wasn't as good at planning as she thought she was. 3 years ago, she told me I should be grateful for the opportunity to work for the business I had built. Today, that business is entirely mine, and she has nothing. That birthday surprise she planned for me ended up being the best gift she could have given me. It was the moment I had been waiting for to execute 3 years of careful planning. And it was absolutely perfect. The most satisfying part is that she gave me exactly what I needed to destroy her. If she had just continued treating me as her employee and never attempted the Seattle scheme, I might never have had the evidence I needed to dissolve the partnership. Her greed and desperation to cash out became the weapon I used to take everything from her. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret how far I took this revenge. The answer is absolutely not. She spent 3 years planning to steal my life's work and abandon me on my birthday. I spent 3 years planning to protect what I had built and ensure that she faced the consequences of her choices. The difference is that my plan worked.